What's up everybody, I'm Kirk, welcome back to the channel. Mortal Sin is an upcoming indie roguelike, revolving around first-person melee combat with a glut of medieval weaponry. Developed solely by one Nikola Todorovic, Mortal Sin aims for a visceral, tough-as-nails experience with an atmosphere meant to chill you to the bone. Aiming for a 2022 release, Mortal Sin has had a Steam demo available for some time now, but the developer was kind enough to send me a chunky beta so I could take a swing at it. So today I'm going to be taking a look at this sinful slasher, giving my initial thoughts on what works so far and what needs some work. But before all that, if you're new here and you're digging what you're seeing, please consider liking and subscribing to help support this channel. Alrighty, let the dismemberment begin. This beta build of Mortal Sin featured 3 distinct areas: the dungeon, caves, and forest, with the latter 2 areas unlocked from progression, all leading to the final Maw of Sin area. You'll begin in a hub zone under a striking blood-red sky, where you can use yellow energy, gathered during gameplay, to purchase randomly generated gear as well as stock up on support items. From there, venturing into an area of your choosing. Each area is made up of various procedurally generated chambers, populated with traps, chests, goons, and lots of spooky stuff. To progress, the player must push a set amount of big red buttons, which will unlock the exit. After a certain amount of chambers are completed, they are granted a single buff of their choosing, randomly generated of course, with the final section of each area dedicated to a fight against a big bad bossy boss. Yep, it's a straightforward roguelike, with the X factor being the first-person melee combat. Enemies must be fully dismembered to be defeated, arms, legs, and noggin, their behavior changing depending on which part you lob off first. Losing an arm will diminish an enemy's attack, and a headless enemy will have no idea where you are, sometimes attacking their own by mistake. Along with unarmed attacks, players are allowed to carry 2 weapons at a time. They'll start with a basic sword, but can collect axes, halberds, hammers, cleavers, and magic staffs of various spell types, and can bulk up their defense with various pieces of armor, helmets, boots, chest plates, etc. All armor and weapons can break down from use or taking damage, although their durability can be restored by drinking blue potions. Oh, and red potions restore your health. Both potions can be replenished by corresponding energy drops after defeating enemies. During a run, players will discover weapons with distinct buffs and bonuses that can give them an edge in combat. For example, an axe that can damage all limbs upon striking, swords that shoot energy shockwaves, and boots that launch fireballs when you kick. These abilities usually come at the expense of item durability, so it's wise to be mindful about how you use them. Satisfying melee combat in a first-person game can be a tricky thing to pull off, and so far Mortal Sin seems to be on the right track. There's a good sense of impact to your strikes, with a slight pause in the frame rate and a jiggle of your camera whenever your weapons connect. A simple but effective technique. Swinging your sword in the direction of your movement keys dictates the direction of the swing, and holding the left mouse click can charge for a power attack. You can kick to stun enemies and push them back, and bash to stagger or break through a defense. And much of combat, especially early in a run, hinges on stringing combos of these attacks together. Naturally, you can block, and if the player successfully parries an incoming attack, their next hit will be an extra damage power strike. That can really get the limbs flying. Blocking is especially important when an enemy flashes yellow, as their next hit will be a devastating critical attack, which is the easiest way to find yourself flat on the cold stone floor. Once you get a hang of the mechanics, you'll find a nice satisfying flow to the combat. I do have some critiques on the combat system, but let's save that for later and move on to the visuals. Mortal Sin shoots for a graphic novel-inspired look, and I think it mostly hits the target. Levels are monochromatic and sparsely lit, giving them an inky appearance which naturally lends itself to a spooky atmosphere. While some color is used decoratively, it's usually for gameplay purposes. Enemies are a sharp blue, making them easy to identify, and letting me pretend I'm playing a dark and twisted version of the Smurfs.
La 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 la, sing a happy song. La 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 la, Smurf the whole day long.
Obstacles and traps are a sharp red, and if you see yellow, you best start blocking, because a world of hurt is coming your way. It tips more into function than form, somewhat minimalist, although there is some nice detail in the environments and enemy models. I think it's a smart way to go, considering this is a one-man indie project with limited resources. It makes the mechanics clear with just enough style to keep it interesting. If I had one complaint, it's that the film grain effect is a bit overdone, and it would be nice to have the option to turn it down or off altogether. Overall, I did enjoy my time with this beta build, and I was impressed not only with the amount of content included so far, but also the stability of it. There's some minor jank here and there, but in general, performance was on point with only the occasional hitch. There's some promise here. However, to be honest, I think this game still has a bit to go before it's ready for a proper release, and from this point, I'll be discussing things I feel this game needs to work on. Let's return to presentation. While I appreciated the visuals of this game, I do think the stiff enemy animations need some TLC. Enemy tells and blocks are clearly defined, which is good, but sometimes they do this sidestepping dodge animation where they just throw their hands up in the air and slide to the side, which looks awkward. And whenever you chop off an enemy's legs, instead of falling to their stomachs and crawling, which is what you'd expect them to do, their torso stays upright and they just keep moving forward as if their legs are clipped under the floor, which looks a little lazy. Sound design is competent, and while the music for the hub, cave, and forest areas was fine, the dungeon has this unnerving screeching ambiance that got irritating really fast, to the point where I had to turn off music entirely. Another thing is that levels are full of haunted house-style jump scares. Rotten torsos that suddenly drop from the ceiling, heads on spikes that shoot up from drains, and ghostly faces that emerge from the walls. It's a neat idea, but the scares are let down by underwhelming sound design and become predictable after a few runs, on top of the fact that they serve very little importance to the gameplay. I'm all about this game being scary. I just don't think this is the best way to do it. Okay, that one got me a little. Next, gameplay. Mechanically, Mortal Sin's combat is effective. However, where fighting against a single enemy or a handful of enemies feels fine, going up against a mob is when things can start to get on the clunky side. Enemies can easily surround and jostle you about in a confusing blur of blue, which tips into the unfair side. To be fair, these situations are more uncommon than common, and perhaps my own skill level might not have been up to snuff, but I do think the larger battles need some attention so they don't feel quite as messy. Enemy dismemberment is a nifty idea, but I think it can be pushed way further, with consequences beyond enemies becoming weaker. Like, what if dismembering a certain enemy causes them to become more dangerous? Or what if some enemies have to be dismembered in a certain order, or else they'll become more dangerous? For example, what if a legless enemy crawls on the ground faster, making them harder to hit? Or maybe cutting off a head of a certain enemy first causes them to explode. Perhaps the player can use that to their advantage, kicking that self-destructing enemy into an approaching mob. I'm not saying it has to necessarily be that, but there's a lot of avenues you can take a system like this, and at the moment, Mortal Sin is only picking at the surface. One fun aspect of this game is attacking with weapon combos, such as hitting enemies with a magic attack and then switching to a standard weapon to finish the job. A very effective combo I found was freezing enemies with an ice staff and power striking with my other weapon to shatter them. It was so effective, in fact, it kinda broke the game a little. I bested many runs by walking into a room, freezing, smashing, and moving on, and there wasn't much these undead underlings could do about it. The balance for this is supposed to be weapon durability, as magic attacks will diminish it, but I rarely found myself hurting for blue potions. I'm sure tweaking and balancing can help this, but I wonder if this game should explore enemies that are immune to certain damage types to prevent this sort of spamming, and if it works, maybe enemies that can only be hurt by certain damage types, just to make things a little trickier. In my opinion, roguelikes should always keep players on their toes, and find ways to disrupt them from relying solely on one strategy. Level design is another area that needs some work. Mortal Sin does a good job mixing up the layouts of each of its inky chambers. My issue though is with the traps. Traps are very easy to get around and seldom felt like a danger. In fact, it was the enemies that were more at risk from the traps. Now, a strategy in this game is to use the traps against enemies, like kicking them into them, which is awesome. The thing is, enemy AI is not smart enough to avoid or move around the traps. So, something that would often happen is I'd walk into a room and in the distance hear enemies dying from beelining into traps, which only serve to diminish the overall difficulty. In fact, in one specific chamber, featuring a spike trap in the middle and wall shooters on the sides, I found I could cheese through some of it by standing at the entrance and moving side to side, to cause the baddies to kill themselves on the traps. Sure, the AI could be tweaked, but I think the traps need to be better hidden, as to surprise unaware players, with hints of their whereabouts. Yeah, you can have an easy-to-dodge swinging axe at a doorway, or a small red pressure plate near it that when stepped on will cause the axe to swing down. If a player is mindful, they can get around it, but if they're rushing through, they'll get surprised. Or they could use it as a means to kill an unsuspecting enemy. If done right, something like that could raise the tension of playthroughs. Last, something I felt was missing from Mortal Sin was a sense of risk-reward, a key aspect I enjoy in roguelikes that can help each playthrough feel distinct. After getting through each area multiple times, you'll quickly realize there's not much mixing them up, besides different layouts and random weapons and armor. It all starts to feel too predictable too fast. And I kept finding avenues where the developer could really have some fun with the player. Here's an example. As you explore, you'll find dead bodies holding new weapons you can equip. Every once in a while though, they'll lurch at you for a jump scare. My question is, well, what if they did get up and attack you? What if approaching a body to equip a new weapon always runs the risk of you being attacked? Making it a choice players have to weigh out for themselves. Same with the treasure chests. There are red chests throughout where you can find new gear, but what if there were a few different colored chests that maybe held a 50-50 chance of giving you a better weapon or harming you in some way? Also, could there be alternate paths? What if when you unlock the exit, there was an alternate exit you could take that leads to a much tougher chamber, but with better rewards? Or maybe imposed modifiers, like if you go in here, you can only use unarmed attacks, but you'll gain more yellow energy or earn a high-level weapon. Something like this could really boost the fun factor and make every play session a distinct one, because as it stands, the longer you play this game, the more samey it starts to feel. While I don't think Mortal Sin is quite ready for prime time, I do think it is shaping up nicely. The gameplay is fun, the art style is striking, and the amount of sheer content so far is respectable. Plus, overall, I genuinely think a first-person melee roguelike is a good idea. From here though, it's a matter of refine. I urge the developer not to focus so much on adding content, but rather exploring and deepening their gameplay systems, wringing out every last drop of gameplay they can from them and really making sure the rogue elements make for a unique experience every play session. It can make the difference between a game that's enjoyed for a few days and a game you can't tear yourself away from for months. But hey, that's just my opinion, and you don't have to take my word for it. As a reminder, there is a demo for Mortal Sin on Steam right now, and if this game looks interesting to you, I urge you to try it out for yourself and give the developer your feedback. I know for a fact they're eager for it. Otherwise, be sure to let me know your thoughts on Mortal Sin down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications on future uploads. It's a couple clicks for you, but a massive help for this channel. And don't be shy, come say hi in the Kirk Collects Discord, linked below. I'm Kirk, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there.